Some more breaking news about Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth that dwarfs the already bad news that's been surfaced against him. According to new reporting, Pete Hegseth had an internet connection that bypassed the Pentagon's security protocols set up in his office to use the Signal messaging app on a personal computer. The existence of the unsecured internet connection is the latest revelation about Hegseth's use of the unclassified app and raises the possibility that sensitive defense information could have been put at risk of potential hacking or surveillance. Known as dirty internet by the IT industry, it connects directly to the public internet where the user's information and the website's access do not have the same security filters or protocols that the Pentagon's secured connections maintain. The biggest advantage of such a line is that the user would not show up as one of the many IP addresses assigned to the Defense Department. Essentially, the user is masked. And one might ask, why might certain IP addresses be blocked from the Defense Department? Because they might expose the Pentagon to hackers or infiltration from foreign countries. And perhaps the party that spent the better part of a decade decrying Hillary Clinton's recklessness with a personal email server might be the first ones to understand that. In fact, if Pete Hegseth really wants some guidance here, he might want to consult Pete Hegseth.
Apparently, the standard operating procedure inside the Clinton Secretary of State office was to send emails that couldn't otherwise be printed to the maid to print them out of a secure area or from a secure area and then hand them off. Any security professional, military, government, or otherwise, would be fired on the spot for this type of conduct and criminally prosecuted for being so reckless with this kind of information. The fact that she wouldn't be held accountable for this, I think, blows the mind of anyone who's held our nation's secrets dear, who's had a top secret clearance like I have and others, who know that even one hiccup causes a problem, let alone a standard procedure like this.
So if anybody should know better, it's probably Pete Hegseth. In other words, not only did Hegseth use an unsecured app, but bypassed the Pentagon security protocols to also put that app on a personal computer. And this, of course, comes amid the revelation that he also had a second Signal chat that included his wife, his brother, and his personal lawyer. Because let's be honest, why wouldn't the Secretary of Defense want to run this thing by the entire Thanksgiving group chat? Am I right? I asked President Obama's National Security Advisor Susan Rice what would have happened if an analogous situation had occurred when Obama was in office. She didn't pull any punches. So we are right now watching the fallout from Signalgate 2.0, where we found out that there was a Signal chat that not only included the editor of The Atlantic, but a second Signal chat where Pete Hegseth had included such need-to-know folks like his wife, his brother, and his personal attorney. I have to ask first and foremost, what would have happened if something analogous had occurred during the Obama administration?
The Secretary of Defense would have been fired in a heartbeat after the first outrageous revelation of Signalgate 1.0, along with many of the others. And that's because, Brian, they were conducting sensitive deliberations about whether and when and how to engage in military action against a foreign adversary on an unsecure non-governmental system. And then Hegseth took the outrage to a whole new level by putting sensitive, classified operational details into, now we know, both chats, one among the National Security Council principals or cabinet level secretaries, and then this new one that we've just learned about, which is even more outrageous, with members of his family and personal advisors. This is a huge breach of national security. It puts our men and women in uniform at risk because these conversations occurred on Signal, a commercial application, and we now know on Hegseth's personal cell phone, which can easily be hacked and is likely certainly being monitored by our most sophisticated foreign adversaries.
So can you dig into that bit a little bit? Because that's what interests me, because there's a lot of folks who say, you know, there has been a lot of disparagement of Signal, and Signal in and of itself is a secured app. But what does it mean, for example, that he uses his personal device, and how can that make even a secure app like Signal that much more unsecure?
Well, first of all, Signal is end-to-end encrypted, which makes it, for a commercial application, pretty strong. But it is not anything like the kind of encryption that we utilize in the national security agencies for communications that involve classified information, which this clearly is. And so there's no comparison. You know, people like to use Signal, and it's certainly better than nothing, but it is not the equivalent of a classified system. Point one. Point two is that in particular, when you are using Signal on a cell phone, and especially a non-government issued cell phone, which our adversaries are certain to take an interest in. Look, as a former national security advisor to this day, I expect that the Chinese and the Russians and the Saudis and perhaps the Israelis and maybe the Iranians are in my cell phone. And they are still curious about what I say and do. And I'm mindful of that as I conduct my business. Any national security official needs to expect that their phone can easily be compromised, because that is the capacity that we know exists.
And look, I think by now you understand the ways in which Hegseth has put our national security at risk and continues to put our national security at risk. I think you also understand that, given Hegseth's outspoken hostility for Hillary Clinton, none of this is a surprise to him. If there is one issue that a former Fox anchor should be able to appreciate, it is that the reckless use of personal devices is disqualifying, given their own decade-long hysterics about it. But the point worth digging into here is that it is doubtful at best that he'll be fired. Why? Because it was never about our safety or our national security. It was always about just filling a cabinet with groveling sycophants who would rubber stamp Trump's edicts. If it was ever about competence, Hegseth wouldn't have been there in the first place. In other words, it's not some revelation here that he's bad at his job, because it was never a qualification to begin with. Hegseth is there because he will say yes to Donald Trump, and so long as he continues to say yes to Donald Trump, chances are slim that he goes anywhere. This is not about our national security. It is about ensuring that Trump is surrounded by a groveling band of hangers-on so that they can stroke his ego and tell him he's great. The Trump administration isn't about you or me or Americans more broadly. The Trump administration is about Donald Trump. Before you go, if you enjoyed this content and you want to see more and support independent media, please subscribe to this channel. The subscribe button will be right here on the screen. But second, the reality is that we are now in a political environment where this administration can lean on any of the social media platforms to suppress certain voices if they don't like critical coverage. That means my longevity here is in the hands of a few tech billionaires who are already making it clear that they are willing to cater to this administration. To that end, signing up for my newsletter is a way for me to reach you directly if that ever becomes necessary. I'll put the link right here on the screen as well, so please sign up. It's free, but there's also an option to do a paid subscription if you'd like to support me and my team. I really appreciate it. Thanks so much for watching.